Hi, and welcome to the second episode of our podcast, FX Refreshed. Today, we're talking to Jason Dochney, principal owner at Archetype Consulting, where he works with companies of varying sizes and is able to intelligently identify areas of inefficiency within their supply chain processes and make calculated recommendations to improve the flow, which can result in a six-figure cost saving. Let's dive in.
Mark, yes, you mentioned it. U.S. West Coast and the ships lined up. They can't get into berth. And that takes me back to 15, 20 years ago in the supply chain industry when we were with Fritz Companies and UPS Supply Chain Solutions. And we're in a pandemic right now. Uncertainty is the primary topic in a lot of conversations. So what we were up against at that point in time, where people just kind of threw up their hands in the industry and steamship lines were on the West Coast. They couldn't get into berth. So what did they do? Force majeure is a term that comes into play, and we'll have to see how much that plays out in the future. But those steamship lines back in the day, 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, when they couldn't get into berth on the US West Coast, they went to Manzanillo, Mexico. They offloaded their containers, and we had to deal with it.
Right. So, and this might be more of an ignorant question. Why is there the delay getting these ships into port? What's causing? I mean, obviously, we're gonna throw out the COVID conversation there, and it could be a whole host or a range of reasons. But like, what have you got an idea specifically why, or can you talk to why the ships are stacked up in the way they are?
Yeah, absolutely. Capacity is the primary reason for those delays. The COVID testing, which the country is trying to determine what protocols are going to be potentially most efficient to get to where we need to go in transportation. So, not going too far into details, but those are some of the top line topics that are out there right now in the conversations that I'm having and what I'm seeing.
Right. It's so I've had a couple of conversations this week alone with some freight forwarders who have said they're having a bit of a hard time with some of their clients and prospects because of the routes that they have are not conducive to what the client's looking for. Like the client wants product tomorrow. And the freight forwarders, as great as they are working their nuts off, if you will, if I can say that, to really try and find that best passage in. But I'm guessing unless you're I don't know, I don't want to talk derogatory to like maybe some of the smaller, medium-sized freight forwarders out there, but maybe unless you're a behemoth, a global monster-sized freight forwarder, you pretty much everybody's going to be in the same predicament, I would have thought.
Absolutely. And I picked up on a couple of words that you said, Mark, the best passage in. So right now we're in uncharted territory. Obviously, we've been there for a year. So the best passage in to the solution that we're in today, I think, is collaboration. And that's why you had that conversation because you took the time to ask the question. That's why we're having that conversation today. We've been collaborating for over a month now, and we keep finding nuggets in these conversations.
We do. Okay. And from an importer's perspective, another conversation I had with somebody else, they were suggesting that importers are willing to pay extra for that, just to get their goods and services in. And even though we're at where we're now, so we're just literally into middle of February, but what we're seeing today outside of California is going to potentially impact the Christmas period, right, and what gets on shelves in and around December.
True. And it's February and we're already talking about December and what's going to hit the shelves. And a couple of conversations that I listened in on and I was a party to, people are trying to gauge, when is this going to turn around? When are we going to see something different, something new? And we're talking about how we might react to December 2021 right now.
Yeah.
So who knows what that magic date might be, but the key piece is to keep collaborating, keep having conversations. Here's one of the most basic principles, Mark. Here's one of the most basic principles that I have seen to be effective in the last 12 months, and that's transferable skills. And we take that approach and we say, a month ago, before Mark Ridley and I started having conversations about GreenShootsFX and the financial aspects of what's going on right now, and me listening to you and saying, look, I think that might apply to supply chain. So let's go take another week, have 3 more conversations and say, here's what we're talking about. Mark says this. I say from a supply chain perspective, I think it fits in right here. And we're not trying to box in anything, but it's those little nuggets that we find that fit right there.
And that comes back to that collaboration piece that you just mentioned as well, right? Where we are trying to, I guess, help importers or exporters, certainly in my case, solve for maybe more than the one problem that I know they have when it comes to foreign exchange payments, right? So in the logistics world, we're forever talking about the movement of product from A to B. And what we're interested in that from a GreenShootsFX perspective, but what we're interested in is the payment from B to A, right, and how we can best manage that and how we can provide the better rates for importers versus maybe some of the banks that they might be using today, providing the risk mitigation tools that go around that as well. I mean, just before you and I jumped on having a conversation with a prospect who is, and rightly so, concerned at the strength of the euro right now. They bring a ton of stuff in from Europe, from the Eurozone specifically, and we're at 122 today, and we're looking at maybe 125 by the end of the year. So that individual that I spoke to is very much at least akin to where the rates are today and where they have been, and was paying kind of like $1.06 and $1.07 for at this time last year, pretty much, and he's going to be paying $1.25 come the end of this year. So for importing the exact same components from the exact same place. So but when we're sitting in front of those individuals, we've also seen that the conversation can take a slight turn where they're concerned about like the rising cost of containers, for example, right? So in the past, I think we might have been a bit, or I want to say we, I mean, just people in general might be more akin to, well, I'm really here to talk about my products and my services. What we've always been about as like the individuals, like my business partner and I, we have been about that level of collaboration. We don't get anything for it, but if we've got the ear of somebody who is having a problem, we, like I say, we know that they have more than just the problem that we're trying to solve for. And so we've managed to steer some companies in the direction of maybe some more knowledgeable supply chain experts to have a more deeper, meaningful conversation to see where else they can, save a few bucks. And our kind of view is, in the current environment, every company is really hurting. And if they can save where they can, then that's a good thing, right?
Absolutely. So last week, you and I were speaking. I've been fortunate to obviously learn more about the financial aspect of everything, just by way of our conversations. You made mention to moving something from point A to B. Now that's a pretty simple concept, right? To get anything done, you've got to move something from point A to point B. But last week, I'll go back to this, and these little nuggets that fit right here again. We were talking about supply chain and what does that mean, and my definition, my understanding of supply chain, kind of like a holistic definition, if you will. is the movement of goods, information, and funds. So obviously the funds piece, that's very close to you, and I'm becoming more knowledgeable from that. The A to B, again, that's simple logic. To get something done, you've got to move something from point A to B, but you've picked up on the supply chain, the transportation aspects from the conversations that we've had. So that's the value that I see in what we have potentially ahead of us. I kind of stop right there. A couple of weeks ago, I was very excited about the potential ahead of us. And I had a lot of conversations, Mark, quickly, and you and I discussed that. We validated some concepts with some professionals and some experts in the industry that said, yes, there's some traction to this. You should keep pursuing it.
Absolutely. And so a couple of things that you said there, made a note here. I think one of the things I never really appreciated is the difficulty of getting product from A to B. It can, as a consumer myself, it's so easy to jump on an app and say, right, I'm going to order that and it's going to turn up at my house in the next couple of days. Not really appreciating where the journey started for that particular product, which might be in Asia somewhere. And then, what it takes to get that product from all the way there to all the way over here in the States it's not just a case of it sits on the back of a truck and it gets there, right? I mean, I've been reading a lot of late about the life of a trucker, if you will. There's a lot of bloggers out there, a lot of trucker bloggers out there. And man, that's a tough gig, more than I really, really appreciate, right? So I no longer think of a trucker as a trucker. I'm more of a professional driver. I was kind of like reminded of this almost with from my wife, where about 5.5 years ago. So when we moved to the States, so we're in Boston now. We had a lockup garage in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we had some furniture from like many, 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 many years ago, and thought, I'll fly down to Charlotte and I'll just drive that back up north. Like an hour and a half into that journey, I think it's Route 95, maybe. Hour and a half into that journey, I'm like, I'm just not going to make this. I can't do it. And I'm just pulling over wherever I could, getting out, stretching my legs, like chowing down sugar so that I could just try and get that buzz, try and stay awake. Like these individuals that do the coast, any kind of distance, but like a coast to coast or wherever it might be, I'm like, they're machines. They're just phenomenal human beings. And like some of the bad raps and that they're getting, and some of the poor facilities that are out there for truckers and truck stops. It's not a wonder to me why there is potentially I guess there's a trucker shortage.
Absolutely.
For a whole host of
a perennial issue in the industry. Triple digit, exceeding 100% turnover, depending upon which statistic you want to look at. But yeah, absolutely, Mark. It's an issue in the industry. The truck parking, like what you mentioned, that's required downtime for professional drivers. And we say, hey, for the safety of everyone, and essentially for the safety of you, most importantly, we need you to rest, right? We need you to rest so A can get to B. And the part of the problem with that is, and there are great resources out there for it, but part of the problem is with the industry and some of the shortcomings on how people in the industry, like through these conversations that you and I are having, can take, some actions in a positive manner to help those truckers out, the professional drivers out, to get things from A to B, and also have a safe place to get some rest and get some Z's at night.
Yeah, I agree. So let's turn your attention to maybe some conversations that you might have had this week, or even over the course of the last couple of weeks, with some of your clients or some of your prospects. What's out there at the moment? What's hurting them? What's keeping them up at night? What are you solving for? What kind of direction are you pointing these companies in.
Absolutely. So we had talked about truckers, professional drivers before, and the negative impacts on them within the industry from some of the decisions that the industry has made for the industry over time. So here's what I'm getting at. 3PLs exist to a certain degree because the transportation and asset-based carriers haven't been able to solve all the needs on their own. So we're looking at, and here's the beauty of our conversation, Mark, and I'll get to it. The beauty of our conversation is for 15, 20 years, I've always focused on downstream solutions that fix some inadequacies within the industry. So some of those inadequacies might be fuel surcharge for transportation. Why does a fuel surcharge exist? Well, potentially one reason is because nobody took the time or the effort to go through and adjust the base rate. So a lot of what we see in transportation is reactionary, meaning we're not covering our expenses with the rate that we said we're going to charge. Fuel is rising, so therefore we're not going to fix the original issue with the base rate. We're going to add on a fuel surcharge. And then a pandemic occurs, Mark, and capacity gets tight, and a lot of additional surcharges get added on. So I'm getting back to the point of why it's the beautiful part of why we continue to talk to each other, and that's about fixing an industry on the front end rather than relying on back end solutions that have failed.
Right. So
Mark, the front end solution is, to me, is the opportunity with the currency from the financial perspective. And that's where you come in.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I am an only child of sorts, so this should all be about me, but I do want to make it about you.
No, it is going to be all about you because your birthday is 6 days ahead of mine. You're an only child. I'm an only child. So this is going to be a continual battle of me. So your birthday's coming up. I'll let you have it. And then after that, game on. Because I'm just 6 days down the road.
Excellent. And the good news is I'm always going to be younger. I hope. So broad topics, broad brushstrokes. You're really able to penetrate a business and really look at the inefficiencies that they may have and provide some solutions for that, right?
Right. So in the past, right, you look at controlling inefficiencies, managing exceptions, and automating as much as you can. So if we look at best practices, programs that we might traditionally run in supply chain management, for a client, you might look at their vendor shipments, and that's what you and I are talking about, right? A lot of what impacts potential clients that we might come into contact with in the future. A lot of the solutions that you and I are talking about stems from the vendor at origin.
Right.
It really does.
Right.
So go ahead.
So no, go on. No, go on. I'll let you finish. I've got a couple of questions off the back of that.
So if we look at traditional methods, like I was talking about, and I'll get there quickly, inbound vendor shipments, non-compliance there, rogue vendors just freely shipping product into you, not minding, transportation partners, not minding service levels, etc. Just, hey, we need product in here, so vendors ship in because we need product, right? Well, right. We get product, but that causes issues. So you get non-compliant vendor issues that you then have to deal with. So here's what I'm talking about, not focusing on the long-standing, what we've always done in supply chain, but let's get back to the vendor and what we're talking about. So Ridley's Aviation Services provides support for Dochney's aviation and avionics company in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So for the just pure ease of doing business, because Mark Ridley wants to make it easy on my business in the US, Ridley in the UK says, just pay me in US dollar. Do you see that frequently?
Yeah, more than I like. Well, actually, I like seeing that because we know that we've got something we can solve for.
Absolutely. So, which is why I mentioned that, obviously, because it ties back into what you and I have been talking about. Removing longstanding concepts in supply chain management that don't solve the real problems. But if we go back and put this on the front end and rethink how we're going about managing and navigating through those relationships with vendors in APAC, vendors in Europe, EMEA, those regions, that's where the value is moving forward, I believe.
So then, Jason, like just thinking about some of those conversations over the last few days or couple of weeks or so, maybe peel back the layers of the onion and let us know what are some of the issues that companies are having that you have identified improvements of.
Absolutely. So, Mark, one of the things that you and I were speaking about originally was the financial aspects and some of the concepts that you spoke of that I picked off and saw as opportunity potentially to implement within supply chain. So from that, I had some intentional conversations, and I'm in Oklahoma, and I know that you've worked with entities in Oklahoma. So the biggest driving factor in Oklahoma for us right now is energy. It's oil and gas. Some of the concepts that you and I are talking about, financial strategies for supply chain, through my discovery conversations in the last week, I've identified and uncovered that some of these energy companies here in the Oklahoma region, who are now transitioning facilities from Tulsa because of downsizing, because of the pandemic, transitioning those jobs, those facilities to Oklahoma City. So what does that tell me that these organizations really need? They need money, they need capital, right? So some of the conversations that I have, because the feeling is so strong from the conversations that you and I have, is that I go and follow up on this, and the conversation goes like this. Mark Ridley and I see, in theory, how we could apply some of the things that he always done in finance and take some of the things that we've always done in supply chain, meet in the middle, and replicate the actions that large strategic-minded entities are taking advantage of and executing on daily. So you've talked about it, I validated it. Now we need to go see if we can implement it within supply chain at a smaller level and build up and get the word out that this is a real, true possibility.
Okay. Again, that comes back to the collaboration piece, right?
Absolutely.
Which is
collaboration.
critical.
We have conversations. We throw some terrible ideas out there, and we have more conversations, and then nuggets come and they fit right there.
Is there anything you've seen in the last, I don't know, week or two, couple of weeks that really surprised you about the way that certain companies are managing their supply chain processes?
Really nothing that surprises me aside from the things that unfortunately I always see in the industry. You can have conversations, and if you just simply listen to what the other person is telling you, ask a couple of intentional questions, you can seek an understanding. You can go confirm that understanding that you're trying to seek. And that's what we've really been able to do. So here's what I've been able to confirm is, I believe largely in supply chain, organizations are still doing what they've largely still always done. And you said it, companies don't know what they don't know.
Again, I'm not going to disagree with any of that. What kind of barriers then exist for businesses? So if you're sitting in front of them and you can identify an improvement to a process, to maybe changing, you mentioned earlier on about managing exceptions. Mm-hmm. And when I think of managing exceptions from a banking perspective, as a career banker, like anything that you're doing outside of technology, anything that's manual, is considered an exception in most cases, meaning that a human's involved, meaning that it's going to go wrong at some stage, and risk is often far too great to want to continue that manual process, if you will. So, like, what are you like? Again, what are you seeing, and how can you solve for some of these situations that you see? And what are those? What are the barriers? What are people saying in the sense of, well, conceptually I like it, conceptually I get it, but I've got, I don't know, it could be anything, right? 400 other projects. I've got risks over here. I've got no budget. I've got no whatever it might be. Like, so I'm just curious as to what those barriers might be, why companies might be hesitant to make changes to improve efficiencies.
Sure. You just mentioned it in listening to you speak for the last 30 seconds. Mark, you mentioned maybe 6 or 8 different reasons that might be obstacles or barriers to success. The general concept is there's so much going on. Yeah. And the approach that I take when I'm engaging with clients and prospects is, yes, there is a lot that is going on. And we'll have sessions, and we'll go for 20 minutes, and we'll throw 30 things up on a whiteboard. But we'll get it back down to the 10 most important right now. Because if we go back again, I've spoke about it before, being in Oklahoma, I'm right here in the oil patch. We're right here in oil and gas country. So procedurally, if I look at internal processes, companies that are struggling, is it an inefficiency internally that they have? Is it a contract that they had with a vendor where Incoterms were negotiated in a certain way, or payment terms were agreed upon in a certain way? But now, because of what's going on in the world, it makes more sense to relook at it, to revisit, to have another conversation, to listen more to the clients and the prospects, to understand what it is that they're dealing with today, because very likely it might be different than what they were dealing with yesterday when you had the last conversation with them. So here's where I'm going with that. I could easily say that there's a box of problems that we need to solve, that we tend to find, but we're in uncharted territories right now. So I think every solution that we find moving forward starts with active listening and ends with collaboration.
So yeah, I guess there's a lot of moving parts at this point.
Absolutely.
Right? Many businesses are just fighting fires.
Absolutely.
Which, from and again, I'll try and be careful how I say this. I'm not in their seat, so it's difficult for me to really, I can have a certain level of empathy, but it's really difficult for me to really truly understand like those pain points that are keeping them up at night.
There it is. I'm going to stop you right there because you said it. And that's one of the reasons why we continue talking, because I know you get it. You mentioned sitting in that person's seat, and you mentioned the word empathy. And can you really get to a meaningful solution for anyone without starting by allowing yourself to sit in that person's seat with some empathy, listen to what they're telling you, and confirm back to them before you say, I know what we need to do for you. Have that conversation and say, here's what I heard you say. It sounds like you struggle with this, this, and this. If we were able to provide you with this, does that solve?
That's a very useful sales technique, which often puts the buyer at a tremendous amount of ease. And something you mentioned as well, which I know that you've mentioned in the past, which is having that whiteboard session with a prospect or with an existing client, right? And throwing up you use the number 30 issues on a board, but also recognizing in that kind of empathetic way that you have, they're not going to be able to solve for those 30 today. They might want to because they're 30 issues, but there's these barriers, there's other things, there's fires and, all the kind of stuff we just touched upon. But the fact that you then say, okay, well, look, let's take that 30 down to 10. And then, okay, that 10 is, has now the priority, but within that 10, there might be like 3 key things. Okay, let's break this down into like a bite-sized chunk that's manageable, that we can at least implement something to at least alleviate some of that pain. And I like that approach a lot. Is that something that that's a typical kind of MO for your discussions?
That's the process. So for me, an ineffective leader will take on all 30 and fail at every one of them. Somebody who puts some thought into it and listens will take it down to 10 and try and take on all 10 and fail. We take it down, we keep listening. The process takes longer. It takes a little bit longer, but you get down to what's really important, what the client really wants to solve for.
Yeah. And there has to be that equilibrium that, doing nothing in perpetuity is going to hurt the business in the longer run. And may even eventually put the business out of business. So doing nothing.
One poor decision away from closing your doors. One poor decision away. Yeah.
100%. All right, man. Well, look, I think we covered a bit of ground there. I want to thank you for taking the time to catch up with us today.
Absolutely, Mark.
Looking forward to continuing some collaboration, finding out how we can get our 2 pieces of the jigsaw puzzle to fit nicely together, which I think we've done, and apply that methodology to the clients and the prospects that we have and that we're reaching out to. So, Jason, thanks for your time today, mate.
Mark, thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.